Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to our chapter-by-chapter read-along of Frank Herbert's masterpiece Dune for the year 2024. We are rapidly approaching the end of this book, which is set in a far-future science fiction imperium in which a strong element at play is eugenics, selective breeding. This is a far-future science fiction imperial society in which one of the strongest forces in that society operates largely behind the scenes. The Bene Gesserit, a sisterhood of super nuns who have enhanced physical abilities, enhanced mental abilities, the ability, for instance, once they are initiated by the spice melange, which can only be found on the planet Dune, once they are initiated into other memories, the sisters of the Bene Gesserit can access the memories and life experiences of all the other women in their line, going back millennia. A gigantic hoard of voices and experience that they can draw on, including the essentially the uploaded memories of sisters they have each known, provided they're dead and the transfer has taken place. The mechanism of that transfer is a little bit fuzzy, and of course the nature of that transfer is not only fuzzy but dead wrong. That there is no such thing as genetic memory, not of what happened to you last Tuesday. It's a colorful construction that Frank Herbert delves in these books, in all of the Dune books, makes the most of it, makes it an amazing thing, an amazing fictional creation. And the Bene Gesserit don't just hone these abilities in themselves. They have been for centuries guiding certain bloodlines, certain genetic heritages, genetic markers or traits that they see in one group or one family or one person that they want to preserve or enhance, presumably some traits they want to exterminate. Long-term selective breeding of humans in the way that dog breeders will will get a particular combination of traits. And again, that breeding program is a little bit obscure. I have to believe that it has more than one aim, but only one aim is ever stated. And that is the production of something that the Bene Gesserit refer to as the Kwisatz Haderach. A man who has their other memories. A man who can undergo the spice-originated rituals that turn them into what they are. Every man who's ever attempted this has died. And they are looking for, have been for centuries, looking for and guiding breeding populations, royal houses and otherwise, to produce a man who could be the Kwisatz Haderach, someone who can be everywhere at once. A man who has the abilities, powers, and perceptions of a Bene Gesserit adept. As I've mentioned many times before when talking about this book, I have no idea why they would want to do that. I assume that that is their ultimate overriding centuries-long goal because this series of books is written by a man. Otherwise, I see no reason why they would ever want to do that. Why wouldn't their goal be to produce a sister who can access male memories? Why would the goal be to produce a man who can access everybody's memories when they've already got a whole sisterhood of presumably enhanced bloodlines? But whatever their motivation is for creating the Kwisatz Haderach, every Bene Gesserit adept, every sister in the sisterhood, is tasked with that as a priority, especially the ones who have caught the eye of key genetic movers. The Bene Gesserit have been very interested in House Atreides and House Harkonnen, the two major houses who are on opposite sides of the storyline in this book, pushing and shaping those two family lines towards not only a union, but also towards maybe producing their Messiah. It was towards this end that the Bene Gesserit not only, we presume, manipulated factors behind the scenes to make sure that Duke Leto Atreides of House Atreides noticed, fell in love with, bought, and consorted with the Lady Jessica, the mother of his heir, Paul Atreides, But also, we can presume that it was behind the scenes maneuvering along these lines that led the sisterhood to order the Lady Jessica to give Duke Leto a daughter and not a son. One of the many biologically enhanced superpowers that the Bene Gesserit have is almost complete control over their bodily functions, one way or another, meaning that a Bene Gesserit sister can determine the sex of her baby. And Lady Jessica is told by the sisterhood, you're his consort, and you are now the at the head of House Atreides, a major noble house in the Imperium. Your man, your lover, is a distaff cousin of the Emperor himself. But you do have divided loyalties. No matter what you do for that, you are still ours. You are still of the sisterhood, and everybody that all the major houses, major and minor houses that consort with the sisterhood seem to know that. They seem to just accept that whatever you'll get from consorting, from having a Bene Gesserit on your staff or in your family, you won't ever be able to get them away from that. They will still have divided loyalties. Everybody seems to know that. In these books, the Emperor, for instance, has a close Bene Gesserit advisor, his truthsayer. There's never any hint that she reports only to him. There's never any hint that he would, in 70 years of being on the throne, even ask her to be loyal only to him. There's also no hint whatsoever that his own daughter, Princess Irulan, is Bene Gesserit trained. There's no hint that of a more simplistic idea of her being loyal to House Carino first and then to the sisterhood. No, it's a divided loyalty. The Lady Jessica never stops acting in this book on behalf of the sisterhood, in addition to acting on behalf of House Atreides. But her loyalty and her love for Duke Leto overcomes her instructions at that point, at that crucial point anyway. She gives him a son because she knows he wants it. Would have loved a daughter, but the important thing is that his firstborn be a son and heir to his dukedom, so she gives him a son. And the sisterhood is irritated with her because that throws off their breeding plans. They don't fire her or anything. They don't arrange to have her poisoned or murdered in some other way. And when she and her son, now grown to a teenage boy, Paul, when they flee into the desert, she's watching him for all sorts of signs. He has always shown evidence of prescience, which is one of the, I guess, characteristics that the sisterhood has been building towards. She doesn't really know. The sisterhood, as far as the sisterhood is concerned, the chance for Kwisatz Haderach in this generation, a daughter married to Baron Harkonnen's nephew Feyd-Rautha, is lost because of Jessica. And they'll just have to rearrange things. They'll have to wait a little longer. The Bene Gesserit are extremely good at waiting. But one of the, I hate to use such a dumb word as a theme, but one of the ideas animating this book is actually expressed in this book and expressed in every one of the other Dune books that Frank Herbert writes, which is how dangerous it is to want a savior figure and how doomed is the generation that actually gets what they want. And it turns out that there's as we wrap up this book, it turns out that there's all sorts of talk, all sorts of suspicion, especially on Jessica's part, but also on Paul's part himself, that he might be the Kwisatz Haderach. But it's not on anybody's mind at the moment that we are in this story. Instead, there has been a tense meeting between Gurney Halleck, an old war master of the dead Duke Leto Atreides, and Lady Jessica. And it was tense, it should be the meeting of old friends who both survived the treachery of the Harkonnens, but instead it's tense because Gurney Halleck has been absolutely convinced in the intervening 3 years that it was the Lady Jessica who betrayed House Atreides and caused the death of the old Duke. This is a suspicion that he shares, unbeknownst to him, with the old Duke's mentat, Thufir Hawat, who we will meet again very shortly in this book. And in that scene, Gurney intends to kill the Lady Jessica in front of her son, but only after he's made her confess that she was, in fact, the traitor. It's a tense scene. It's the last one that we did, and I still don't really understand it. I mean, I guess Gurney Halleck was expecting that Paul Atreides would kill him anyway, even if Jessica did confess. I don't know of any battle-trained son who wouldn't do that, regardless of whether or not the treachery was proven. But in any case, Paul and Jessica convince Gurney that he is wrong and that she's not a traitor. And they all make up, and he sings them a tune on his balisette, and Paul leaves the room, and he is shaken, not because he just saw his oldest advisor holding a knife to the back of his mother, but because he didn't foresee it. It's not that he saw it, it's that he didn't foresee it. His prescience seems to be dulling as his body gets more and more used to the spice that is in his food, the spice that is in his coffee, the spice that is in the air. He seems to be developing a tolerance for the spices enhancing of his own prescient abilities. And he needs to do something about that, because he's convinced more than ever, especially by the arrival of Gurney Halleck, that he needs those prescient abilities. That he needs to change his little localized Lawrence of Arabia Arab revolt into something much grander, into something much more of a death blow to the Harkonnen. So he decides to directly subject himself to that water of life ceremony that makes a Bene Gesserit into an adept, that gives them access to their other memories, because they take in a highly refined version of spice made through a sandworm, and their biochemistry changes it. And the biochemistry of the men who have tried it was unable to do that, and so it was fatal to them. It is a poison. And the chapter that we're reading today is very, very basic. We don't see Paul try that. We see him decide that he will try it, and then this chapter opens, and he has tried it weeks ago, and has been in a coma that whole time. Completely unmoving. No bodily functions whatsoever. His vital signs, we're told, so low that they're barely detectable even by the finest art that the Bene Gesserit, that Lady Jessica can bring to bear. She summons his Fremen wife, Chani, to be at his side. Doesn't know quite why, but figures instinctively she should be here. She might be able to do something that I can't. She tells Chani that she has subjected Paul's blood to every test imaginable for poison, and there is none. It all comes back negative. I always wondered what those tests are. The Fremen don't have any scientific equipment for testing blood, and Jessica certainly doesn't. She and Paul were thrown out into the desert in the clothes they stood up in. So unless it's a Bene Gesserit way, somehow, one of those enhanced biological abilities, unless it's that, I don't know how she would know. But she doesn't know what's wrong with them, and doesn't know quite how to spread the word to the other Fremen that their leader, their god Messiah, appears to have been fatally poisoned. He's not dead, but he's not waking up either. And Chani comes up with an idea to drop just a drop of the water of life, just a drop of that changed spice essence on Paul's lips, just to see if it would have an effect on him. And it does. It instantly revives him. And he lets them know what happened, which is that he took some of the water of life, and it didn't kill him. Instead, what it did, the chapter is very low key in hammering this home, but what it did is demonstrate to him that he is, in fact, the Kwisatz Haderach. It did open up his senses. It made him into something more than human, much more than human. Frank Herbert doesn't really dwell on this in later books, but I have always wondered. Obviously, such a change as that would cause all sorts of biological havoc in Paul Atreides. Is it possible that this chapter gives rise to God Emperor of Dune, makes that possible in some way that it would otherwise not be? Makes him much more thoroughly a creature of the spice, so that sand trout will not kill you, but rather enhance you? I don't know. It's a question for a chapter-by-chapter read-along of God Emperor of Dune. Instead, Paul's worries about the dulling of his far sensing, to take a term from Julian May, are over. those abilities are now quintupled. They are orders of magnitude greater than any that any human being has ever possessed. They allow him to be many places at once. They allow him, through all sorts of extra sensory abilities, to know things that it seems like no one could know. It's, like I said, an oddly underplayed moment in the book, considering how much has been leading up towards that very thing. And the reason it's underplayed is because there's something much, much more important on the horizon. The chapter ends with Paul simply noting to Chani and his mother that the whole of the Imperium has gathered in orbit over Dune. The Emperor is here. And so are a lot of houses, major and minor, who would otherwise not have gone to the ruinous expense with the Spacing Guild of buying passage to this planet, this barren desert world. They're almost all up there, in orbit. Things are coming to a conclusion. Paul's decision to abandon guerrilla warfare in the ergs of the Deep South was a wise one. The prize of all prizes, the emperorship, has come to him. So we rocket on from here. This was a non-action chapter, and it's the last of its kind. We rocket on from here to the end of the book. So we'll do the next chapter next time. I'll wrap this up for now, and I'll see you then. Thank you, BookTube.